I think if you can be true to where you're at on that change journey and modelling for your teams quite authentically where you're at. So although the leaders of a team need to help their people manage through the change, unfreeze old behaviours, understand why the change is taking place and particularly what their role is, probably the biggest thing people leaders can do is make the change relevant.
Welcome to the People Leaders Podcast, the audio resource for managers and business leaders creating high-performing teams. Join leadership and team development experts Jan and Michelle Turkelson each week as they explore both subjects from every angle. Through practical tips, valuable insights, and compelling interviews with leadership experts around the world, you'll learn how to bring out the best in your staff and how to give your best as a leader.
Hello everyone, welcome to another People Leaders podcast. I want to introduce you to our newest member of the team, Virginia Thompson. Virginia has worked in, corporate facilitation, consulting, and also executive coach for the last, 15 years. We know her as a master coach, as well as someone who has a really key ability to manage large-scale change. We've worked with Virginia on a number of large transformational programs, and we are just so excited to have her. So welcome, VT.
Yay! Good to be here, Jan.
So when I introduced you, I said, we just think you are such a good coach because you get to the source of a problem and you like exploring. And one of the things that I know you do really well is you help employees connect to strategy and purpose really well. And on other podcasts, we say that this is such an important skill for a people leader. So is there anything else that you would want people to know about you?
Look, firstly, thank you for spending the time with me today. As you know, I love what I do. I think that's core to being good at what you do. So I'm kind of working in my purpose all the time. And I think that I really enjoy looking at the emotional contract that goes on. And to your point about connection, we are forming emotional contracts with people, with organisations, with each other all the time. And obviously we've worked on that in the past, but that concept of, people that we deal with have got a little check and balance going on the whole time in the way they interact with. That's how we operate. So, keeping that front of mind and being in the work that I love to do. So very blessed.
Yeah, I hear you. So what I wanted to do now is kind of like draw back the curtain because we know you as being...
Sounds scintillating.
I know, doesn't it? Yeah, I've seen you in action as far as coaching and group coaching, situations. And I wanted for people to get a sense of what you have noticed there to be as far as, because you have coached a lot of C-suite and senior executives and people with a lot of influence. Can you perhaps share with us, have you found that there'd be a common theme of problems that they're trying to solve, or is there anything that you could share with us about that would be willing, that we could actually gain some insight?
Look, great question, Jan. Look, I think that executives and all people leaders for that matter, the time to get out of the busy and get out of being busy and stop and reflect and really get back to what matters, what the outcomes are that we're looking to achieve, is sometimes a luxury. So holding that space for smart individuals to take the time is really important. And some of the coaching that, and as you know, some of the coaching that we do, that's the only time in their week that they're given that space. So it's really holding the space for people, to connect in about what's important and what they're committed to. And sometimes it's about holding that mirror up and going on that journey with them, walking side by side. So, I think that's a sort of a common thread that particularly in executive coaching, where life is frantic and there is demands, there's demands from all quarters. And look, and that's not just reserved for executives. I think all of us play multiple roles, and just keeping clear on what's important, what am I trying to achieve, and therefore what do I need to do next. Coaching provides that space.
Do you find that a lot of the people that you coach have a clear idea about what they want, or is this part of the veiling and like questioning them to get clear?
I think a lot of people will come to coaching. Actually, rewind. Some people come to coaching because they're sent. Some people come to coaching because they absolutely seek it out and want it, and then you get everything in between.
Yeah.
So, you never know what you're going to get until you start. What I would say, though, is you need to make sure that chemistry is right. And in that initial discussion with people to say, is coaching and is our coaching relationship going to work for them? That's where you start to uncover what is it that they think that they're going to get from coaching. And that ranges from, I really want to make some change in my life, to I just want to be the best I can be, to there's something really specific that I think is holding me back in terms of effectiveness. So it's a gamut.
Okay, so for people, especially people leaders who are listening to that, what could you share with them around some strategies or interventions that you've coached people with, especially over the last, couple of weeks or couple of months, because I know that you do such a range of work that you have found to be really useful?
Well, if I think about the next couple of months, as you know, I do a lot of work in change and organisations that are going through change. And, if there was a common theme that pops up in coaching, whether it be individual or group coaching, it would be we underestimate the effort that change takes. And particularly when managing change, what we want is to be able to have the change that we're involved in give the business benefit that kick the change off. And sometimes we lose sight of that because we get lost in the activity. So from a coaching perspective, helping people anchor back to what is this change all about?
Right.
And then particularly, humans are messy. Human beings, we look at a change plan, we look at a project plan, that's just a construct. Then we get into the reality of making change and all that comes up for people, the discomfort around change. So I think about a coaching session the other day, just reminding that executive that validating the discomfort, acknowledging the discomfort that he was feeling as much as his people was feeling, made him really accessible to his people. And went, okay, if he's uncomfortable, then it's okay to feel this way. So from a change perspective, I think that making sure in our coaching sessions that we come back to some of those first principles around what makes for successful change in organisations. And it starts with really understanding how humans behave in change. And change is not about systems and processes, it's actually about behaviours.
Right. So for a people leader who is going through a lot of change and is being uncomfortable, and so they're experiencing that, how do they bridge that with their team? So what could they be doing to either share that, so to make themselves, more connected with the people who are going through the change, or how can they accommodate their team who is also going through that change?
Yeah, good. That's a good question. So, authenticity is a word that gets bandied around all the time. But I think if you can be true to where you're at on that change journey and modelling for your teams quite authentically where you're at. So although the leaders of a team need to help their people manage through the change, unfreeze old behaviours, understand why the change is taking place and particularly what their role is, probably the biggest thing people leaders can do is make the change relevant.
Right, yeah.
What is changing? What isn't changing?
Yes.
What is the impact on me? So, you always want to start with the why, get everybody in the bus. But I tell you what, Jan, until that change is felt and I can actually see I need to do something different. I need to use a new system, or I have to let go of an old process, or I have to deal with a new boss. It's in that moment that the change is real.
Right.
Up until that point, we've been talking about what's going to happen.
Yes.
When we get into that point, that's where people leaders really come into their own, because all of a sudden we're in the messiness of the feelings of change and what now is expected of me.
Okay, so we set them up by saying that this is going to change. And then, so how do we, so if I'm a people leader, do I say that in a meeting? Do I hold a workshop? Like, what could I do?
You say it, you write it. So there's a myriad of ways.
Yeah.
So, being clear on what the change is, why it's important, how that change is going to happen, what that means for me. And, there's that old, that expression that, you have to keep communicating, you have to keep listening. So depending upon how long, your change journey is, it's not a one shot in the arm. Well, good, we've let everyone know what we're doing and why we're doing it, and of course everyone's on the bus. So it's the consistency. It's the dealing with the problems that will come along the way, because if one thing we are absolutely sure of is that expect the unexpected. And it's how you respond when things don't go as we thought they would, that from a people leader perspective, you want to have the skills and the tools to be able to deal with that.
Okay, great. So if we talked about if we're going to talk about what are some of those skills that a people leader needs in order to manage that, what would you say they are? What would they need to have?
I think that what you need to be able to do with your teams is to really notice the reality of the change that's going on and how people are faring in that. So, and that requires you to observe. It requires you to ask a lot of questions. It requires you sometimes to listen to stuff that you don't want to listen to. You want to hear that things are going okay. And when they're not, that's the time that you really need to say, tell me more about that. Find out what is really the truth of a situation, because you can't then correct, you can't change it, choose a different course of action until you've actually understood, what's really going on. That sometimes means more work. It sometimes means going back to design a process, which, if we've got a change plan and we're trucking along and ticking it off, do we really want to go there? Tell you what, if you don't, it'll come back to bite you. So noticing, listening, asking questions, checking in, and probably the change will be most successful if you're really engaging and involving people in that change. And that doesn't mean that the change, I've worked with organisations where people are doing themselves out of a job. So that's a difficult change to be involved in, but they're giving their all in the process. So it is actually, it sounds counterintuitive, but they're committed to that process. So, as a people leader, being conscious that the change is kind of unsettling for some. If you gloss over it, at the end of the day, people, you put in place opportunities to test how much are people on the bus, and you need to notice when they're not.
Okay, so what would be an opportunity? So how would I do that?
Oh, so recent one. So we were making a management change, and we had a leadership team. Yes, and we get to the structure and we get to the designing of the role descriptions. One manager really wants to hold on to the old title.
Right.
We get into, but we're moving forward. The business is the two areas are coming together. Really wants to hold on to the old title. So what had the executive team had not appreciated is what was the loss and the fear that was going on for that individual, to the point now where, that individual may actually end up leaving the business, which would be a real shame. But it really underestimated the sense of loss that was going to be attached for that manager.
So how could they have circumvented that?
Yes, they're spending more time. The warning signs were there, so I could walk in and I could see the smoke.
Right.
But in the desire to just keep on trucking and just keep pushing, and this is what I'm saying, it will come back to bite you. Is actually stopping and really unraveling what was the fear for that particular individual. And sometimes you can deal with it, and sometimes you can't. So then, you make a different call if that's not something that you can actually do to help that individual get over the line. Then you're going to make a different decision. But taking more time up front, and this is an important, in this particular instance, this is an important person in that change process. So, more time up front, really notice the signs of, am I with you, am I not with you?
Right, okay. So talking about that's transformational change. However, the change that we experience now is going to be the slowest change that anyone is ever going to experience, because it's just going to keep on getting faster, yeah? So how do we brace ourselves, or how do we start to manage that personally from a people leader's perspective, and then for their team? How would you kind of like galvanise them or set them up for success?
Look, I think a couple of things are really important. Your own personal resilience. I think understanding yourself in change and what your triggers are. Having some real sort of behavioural flexibility as a people leader, because, people respond differently. So having enough flexibility to deal with the different reactions that you get is important. And also, this is going to sound counterintuitive, but there's a lightness to which, we can bring to our work.
Yes.
We're changing systems. No one is going to die.
Yeah.
Yes, it might be, it'll put us back 2 weeks. It might cost us, 20 grand. So putting things in perspective for people is important.
Right.
I'm sure some of my clients will hate to hear me say that, but yeah, having perspective about what this change is and what it means is also important for people leaders, because it can become all-consuming. So checking in with your own sense of perspective, I think, is really important, particularly as, change is all around us all the time, in everything that we do. And some of it we jump on the bus and we love, and other stuff, including me as well, I'm dragged kicking and screaming because I've got no choice.
Yeah. And so as far as a team is concerned, how do you think a people leader could, I suppose, support their team in change from a really practical, like, I don't have much of a budget for it, but how can I just ensure that they are, capable?
Yeah. Give them a voice.
Right.
Get them involved. Keep reinforcing what's not changing, so that there's some security in there. Understand what their hot buttons are. And then I think, genuinely people like to be let in. They like to feel that they're in the tent. So if there's information that you can share, things that are coming up, simply sharing as a people leader, more than they often. Sharing that. Being quite generous with what you know. Now, obviously, there's a fine line between freaking people out with the things that are coming that we don't want them to, worry unnecessarily about. But bringing people in the tent and treating them like grown-ups. It's amazing, how much people can actually, when they understand why they are involved. There's an old expression that, often people don't mind change. They don't like being changed.
Yeah.
So sort of giving that context, involvement, and people surprise you. Having faith in individuals, I think, is something that, in sort of this day and age, particularly as we want to be agile and want to move with speed, we need to provide people that space to be a bit creative about how they solve problems.
Right, great.
Rather than, I think the other thing that I would suggest is, at the end of the day, it's substance over form. So what do I mean by that? I'll give you a good example. A stakeholder map is just a list of names of people that you think is important. That's form. Substance is, I've actually spoken to them. I know what the hot buttons are. I know what they think. And in fact, my team does too.
Right. Yeah. Fantastic. So if you were to share the best advice, or, like a piece of advice that a people leader who is going through change could use, how could you sum that up? What's the best piece of advice you think you could share with them?
Look, gosh, my mind is going all over the place,
I
Jan,
know.
because there is just so much. That's such a loaded question. So if I bring it back to, where do I spend time coaching?
Yeah.
What are the common things? I think that it would be living with ambiguity, helping people live in ambiguity, and helping leaders understand that, ambiguity. Our brains have a need for certainty. We know the David Rock model and SCARF, and our brains, we are wired to look for certainty. Our world is very ambiguous and changing. So, learning how to help people in times of ambiguity, I think probably would be one of the biggest, just concepts to kind of hang on to, and that requires a whole lot of skills. It requires interpersonal skills. It requires checking with yourself, but not pretending that constancy and certainty is something that we can grab onto very often.
Yeah, or is the desired state.
Or is the desired state. I mean, organisations, whether it be you're changing because you've got huge growth plans, or whether it be changing because, things aren't great and you've got to shrink to survive, or whether it be, you're really reinventing yourself for your customers. I mean, that all brings ambiguity, which some of us kind of love.
Yes,
the possibility, the sense of possibility.
You insure it?
Yeah. So being okay for yourself to live in ambiguity and watching what happens for you, and then having some skills and strategies to allow that. I suppose to know that life is ambiguous, and particularly in times of change. So we search for certainty. We need to learn to live in the grey.
Right. Okay, so is there anything else that you would want to share with people listening today?
Look, on change or in coaching? Where would you like me to go?
Oh, there's so many possibilities, BT, because you've got such a wealth of information and knowledge. Yeah, whatever comes up for you.
I think on the coaching side of things, is for coaches who might be listening to this, or those of us who are coaching practitioners, it's a craft that you hone forevermore. And as individuals, I've got two coaches. So as individuals, we are coachable ourselves. So I think working on yourself and continuing to work on yourself is really important. And that's not just self-development and becoming better at what you do, but also becoming a better human being for those that, that you interact with. And I mean, we talked earlier about purpose, and I hope to leave people a little bit better for having had an interaction with me, and that's kind of my purpose in a nutshell. And sometimes I'm absolutely in the zone, and sometimes I have to remind myself that that's.
Well, I think you're spot on now.
So I think as a coach, it is keep working on self, and then also continuing to hone your craft, and be interested in all that's going on around you, and the stuff in neuroscience at the moment, and we know is finally we've got some data and scientific evidence and a whole community and research that's backing up what we've known pretty much for a very, very long time. We're emotional beings first. That's what makes it so fascinating. We're messy.
Yeah, we're messy. And the thing about this continuous learning, this is what we've found to be the most effective leaders are those ones who are interested in themselves and also interested in others, and they learn to be become masterful at that.
And that's a great point, knowing how to be a learner again, because when you're expert at something, or you are, you got me here, knowing how to drop back into learner mode. Yep, I've heard this before, but what new distinction can I make? How could I apply that differently? I think that's something that I really work on for myself, and is how do I drop back into learner? And some of my clients, I tell you what, Jan, some of my clients have been my best teachers.
Yes. That's
I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. The one thing that I've picked up the other week was when people say, I know, just stop saying that, because as soon as you know, there's no opportunity to know something else. So, the language that we use will. Thank you so much, VT.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, insightful for all of us. So, this week, the opportunity is, how can you live with a little bit of ambiguity, and what do you actually need to do to create a sense of being, effective in that space, knowing a little bit what's happening, and how are you going to support your people in that?
And just adding one little postscript is don't be afraid to use emotional language. This is uncomfortable. I can sense that, you kind of, you're not happy here, or because at the end of the day, it is validating at many different levels as a leader. So let's get back to some really, because as you just said, language is so important. So let's validate the fact that 80% of our decisions, if all of that we now know in neuroscience, our emotional brain is driving up to 80% of our decisions. It is in charge, as opposed to our critical thinking faculty. So don't be afraid to use emotional language. It's really powerful, and people go, you get me. You can see that I'm slightly shitty. You get me.
That's right. I feel you.
I am acknowledged. And yes, you are right.
That's great advice, VT. Okay, thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the People Leaders Podcast. For show notes and other resources, please visit us at peopleleaderspodcast.com. While you're there, you can subscribe for future episodes so you can continue your own leadership journey. And please be sure to share this and other episodes with your friends and colleagues. The People Leaders Podcast is brought to you by the Experts on Air Podcast Network.